Nope, your eyes don't deceive you. This is another Fiat 500 electric on AutoEV. Why should you bother watching this video, I hear you ask? Because you've already road tested it. Well, actually twice, if you want to think about it that way, because not only did we road test the car at launch, but we also pitched it against its two big rivals, the Mini Electric and the Honda E. But this isn't the same Fiat 500 electric that we had in those two road tests. This one's a little bit different. And you might want to just pay attention to this one, because this could be a real hidden gem. Welcome to another AutoEV road test. Welcome to the Fiat 500 action. And as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we go on to this week's video with the Fiat 500 action, it is of course that time where I ask you to, that's right, subscribe to the AutoEV channel, give the video a bit of a thumbs up and make sure you press the bell button, it's down below, so you're notified of when our next video goes live. If you've been a subscriber to us so far, thank you for your continued support. If not, please consider becoming one, because by doing so, you help us stay independent and bring the great content that we're able to do. So, why another Fiat 500, I hear you saying? You've been here and done it, what's the point? Well, this one's slightly different. You see, electric cars are expensive, there's no getting away from that, and that's most people's barrier to maybe buying one. You're up at around about the £30,000 bracket before you really think about it. And there's very few cars below that can make a lot of sense. But 30 years ago, I started my car sales career with Fiat. And back then we were selling things such as the original Panda and the Uno and the Tipo. And it was back then that, if I'm being honest with you, those cars made most sense in their most basic form. You see, what Fiat do really, really well is do small, cheap, fun cars. You start adding on extras and more tech, and they lose their value. They lose a little bit of their essence, if you like. So what I wanted to do was to live with a 500 action, not just road test it, to actually live with one, put it through the daily rigors of family life, and find out whether this is the pick of the 500 range. Now, it's not just been me that's been using this car, my wife's been using it as well, instead of a usual big SUV. And I have to say, I'd stick around till the end, because this is quite a surprising video. Styling wise, there is very little to differentiate the fact that you haven't dug a bit deeper into your pockets. The action model comes with exactly the same body as the other models in the range. You can only have this one as the hatchback, however. You can't get a convertible in the action model. From the outside, as I've said before, the new 500 has grown in every single dimension from the previous generation, the second generation car, which still does remain in production at Fiat's plant in Poland in mild hybrid form, whereas the new electric 500 is built in the Torino plant in Italy. As I say, from the outside, there's very little to tell the difference. The action comes with 15-inch steel wheels with basic wheel trims on it. You don't get the alloys, although you can option them up. As we'll see later, there are a few options you can have on the car, but that's it. That's the only real difference from the outside. You still get this kind of frowning puppy sort of like look to the car, the big 500 badge dominating the front end, this kind of cheese grater kind of cooling duct down at the bottom, and the short stubby bonnet. I think it looks brilliant. I think it's one of those cars, as I've said previously, that's done retro right. They haven't gone, I think the Mini's become too much of a caricature of itself, whereas the 500, Fiat have managed to evoke memories of the classic 500 in a really modern way. Yep, and down the side, as I say, it's 15-inch wheels with wheel trims on it. You can, as I say, you can obviously spend a little bit of money and option up from 16s or 17-inch alloys if you really want to. I wouldn't personally. I love these little blades, these little perspex blades, which are the side repeater lamps that just jut out of the bonnet like a little flick blade that's come out. I think that's brilliant. Nice big door mirrors, and of course you've got the new sort of like flush, touch-sensitive electronic catch doors as well. So they haven't skimped by going basic on the action model. Doesn't get door handles, for instance. Still got those nice little touch pads inside. Your little 500 logo here, and then your charging port mounted here on the offside rear of the car. And, well, yep, it's the same around the back as well. You've got your 500 logo, the big prominent Fiat badge up there. The only place that actually figures on the outside of the car, which is at the rear tailgate, the nice big Fiat lettering. You get the nice distinctive C-shaped rear lamps that then have this kind of panel that runs across the rear hatch as well. Standard reversing sensors, you get reversing sensors as standard on the car, and the nice big aero spoiler. On the old model, the basic cars didn't get the big spoiler, the big roof spoiler that the higher trim levels could get, whereas you do on the new 500s, standard across the entire range, and a nice reasonable sized screen. At the back, fog lights, reversing lights down at the bottom, but yeah, it's exactly the same as all the other 500s. Why we bother doing this video? We'll get to that. Now, practicality wise, it's the same. It's 185 litres, this boot, and that splits the Honda E and the Mini Electric. We've seen it before. You might think it's quite small, but let me tell you this. The other day, I took my sister and her husband to Heathrow Airport when they jetted off to Italy on their holidays, and they had 4 suitcases. We managed to get 3 in there and 1 in the back seat next to them, and they don't travel light, so that was pretty decent. You do get this little kind of take-out parcel shelf that just kind of clips in. You get this big, rather natty 500 bag for your Type 2 charging cable, and the granny cable to charge just from the home socket lives underneath the boot floor as well, so that's reasonable. You get there. Now you do get the folding rear seat with this one as well, but it doesn't split in a 50-50 fashion. It splits, it folds all in one, and that'll take the total boot space up to 550 litres if need be. So yeah, it's okay. Now I'm not going to lie to you, rear seat space is tight, but it always has been in 500s. You know, since the second generation car came back onto the scene back in 2009. I mean, I can't really get myself comfortable by myself driving. As you can see, I can't get my legs in. I'm quite short. I'm only 5'7", 5'8". Now my head's brushing the roof as well. The backrests are quite upright, and obviously you've got the head restraint. However, if it's just for the two of you, or it's just for running around with small children, my daughter loves this car. She's been in the back of it quite a few times, with her, even with her seat in place as well. It works okay. You also get ISOFIX points on the back seats. There's 2 on the back seats, but there's also ISOFIX points on the front passenger seat as well. So you do have a little bit extra ability to carry another child on the front seat as well. But yeah, it's not exactly commodious, shall we say. And up front, yeah, things are pared back. You know, as I say, it is a much more kind of basic looking car than the higher trim levels, the Passion and the Icon and La Prima models. You don't get the big 10.25 inch touchscreen as standard. You can option it with what's called the radio pack, so you can have that. Instead, you get this, which is just a clamp for your mobile, and obviously you can have it portrait or landscape, and then there's a USB socket there. And all your infotainment and navigation then is controlled through an app, which you download onto your mobile. Now, is that better? I'm not so sure. And it's funny because we've had this car for a little bit longer than we normally have a press car with, because I really wanted to live with this. I wanted to see if we could get by with the most basic 500 that Fiat did. And so what I did was I took my wife's Land Rover off her and gave her car and said, that's your car now to use. So she did a daily commute in it, and she did other bits and pieces in it, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later on. But it's the one thing that we both do agree on, to not be able to just jump in the car, turn it on, and just flick the radio on and just get on your way was a bit of a bind. Having to clamp your phone in and go into an app and start up with the music, and I know it's a bit of a first world problem, but I have to say, yeah, I'm not sure that's, if you are interested in this car, that's probably the one option I would say to go for, is that radio pack, to give you the bigger screen so you can just get in the car and just get on with your day. Anyway, what else has changed? Well, you don't get the body colour, or the option, the body colour panel here, or the material one you do in the higher trim levels. It's just this black painted plastic here, which is fine by me, absolutely fine. Your little 500 kind of logo there is okay. You do get air conditioning, but it's very basic. It's not climate control, it's not auto climate. And these buttons, they are good because they're physical buttons, but they're quite difficult to see when you're driving. So the temperature one, which is here, either this bit here will glow red or black, depending obviously on what you're doing. You don't get an actual temperature readout. And the same with the fan speed. It just kind of comes up with little bars next to it. So they're quite difficult to kind of read at a glance. But again, maybe I'm nitpicking. But the radio pack would give you more access to the heating and ventilation controls. There we go. You also lose wireless charging for your mobile. I like it, but you know, again, it's not entirely necessary, but you have it with the radio pack. But you still get a shelf that's in there where you can pop your mobile in, and there's another USB charging port there. The driver environment is still the exact same as we're used to seeing in the others, which I have to say I really do like. This lovely little elegant two-spoke steering wheel that just reminds me of my old classic 500s two-spoke steering wheel. A little bit flat in the bottom to give you a bit more room here, fair enough. It's not leather, it's just a kind of plastic, but that's okay, I don't mind it. But you do still get controls on it. So you still get, you know, don't think they've skimped on safety assistance, because you still get driver drowsiness alert, lane keep assist, and autonomous emergency braking. Well, that's pretty good. And obviously with this system, you know, you can still hang up and answer your calls here, or you can still control track selection from here as well. Still got automatic lights, and you still got automatic wipers on this side. And then down here, fog lights, dynamic stability control off, electric windows, electric mirrors, that's still standard on the car, so that's all right. You don't get heated seats, but you can option that through the winter pack. Would you have that? Entirely up to you. I'm not sure it would be entirely necessary if you're trying to keep the price down. But the feeling of quality is still very much evident inside the 500 Action. As much as it seems much more basic in here, in terms of equipment level, it doesn't feel like a utilitarian style of car. There is an element of a kind of simplistic luxury about the 500 that I really, really like. You get the driver's instrumentation binnacle here with the digital instruments that you can configure a little bit to show you different things depending on what you want. Again, really simple, really basic, but really nice, but it's exactly the same as you get on the higher trim models. You still got this lovely kind of dividing console between driver and passenger. You lose the armrest, but you still got a cup holder there. You still got decent sort of like storage space. You've still got your E-mode button here for selecting your drive modes, which I'll show you when we're driving it. You still got the electronic park brake. You still get the volume control down here for the radio as well, and you still get the little flip down cup holder down there as well for, you know, cups or bottles. Reasonably okay door bins, you know, say a pair of sunglasses will drop in there or down into the door bins, and they've still got the little electronic button up here to release the doors. You also still get the nice little touches that I really like about the other 500s. So the Turin skyline that's kind of etched onto this sort of like storage pit here, because obviously, say the car's now made at the Mirafiori plant in Turin rather than Poland. The earlier car was. And you also get the little made in Torino embossment inside the door handles, which again I think is a really nice little touch. Glove box, it's all right, you know, reasonable size, anything you want in there, and all the air vents are kind of nicely integrated into this panel. So, let's talk about the seats, because the seats are the same as well. They're exactly the same seats, and they might look a bit basic, but they are lovely, especially on a longer drive. They're just right, and you've got some memory foam on the head restraints now, rather than the really hard plastics that the older 500, the previous generation 500 got. And they're also made from this sequal material, which again, I really applaud Fiat for. So it's completely recycled material that the seats are made from, and 20% of that material is junk that's come out of the world's oceans. So top marks there, Fiat. On the whole, a brilliantly executed, nice little proper dashboard. Just enough information, but in my honest opinion, the radio pack is the one thing I would say you should option up. You should tick that box if you're looking at the 500 Action. It will make your life just that little bit simpler. So, forgo some fancy alloy wheels and a few other little trinkets on the inside, and you save yourself a good deal of cash. Why bother with one of the other models in the 500 range, I hear you say? Well, this is where that price comparison and difference comes into play. You see, the other models use a 44 kilowatt hour battery, giving a range of up to 199 miles on the WLTP figure. The Action, however, uses a 24 kilowatt hour battery, which means that WLTP range drops to just 115 miles. Now, as I say, we've been living with this car for quite some time as a family, and very rarely have we seen that the range actually creep into three figures, if I'm honest with you. It's an actual 100-mile car if you're thinking about that. But don't be too hard on the little 500 just yet, because it will take charging speeds of up to 50 kilowatts, meaning you can actually add 31 miles of range in just 6 minutes. That could be your commuting for an entire week. If you wanted to top it up to 80% full from 10%, it takes just half an hour. And in reality, if you're charging it from a 7 kilowatt wall box, it's just over 4 hours to go up to absolute 100%. And I've actually been charging it from a 3-pin plug, and it doesn't take that long. So if you're using the car as a second car or just for short inner city or sort of like urban routes, do you really need a car that maybe has the potential of 199 miles, especially when it can charge as quickly as this? Now, as well as having a smaller battery and a smaller range, the 500 Action has a smaller power output. It's 93 brake horsepower as opposed to 117 that you get in the higher grade models, the bigger battery cars. Do you miss it? I genuinely don't think you do. I mean, obviously there's a tiny little bit of weight to be saved as well by having the smaller battery car, and therefore it has that sort of alacrity that we've been used to with the 500 electric. Off the line, this is pretty decent. Not to 60s over 9 seconds, but in fairness, it's not really that. It's that 0 to 30 time or that 0 to 40 time that's a little bit more, well, relevant, I think, especially in sort of like more built up areas. And this doesn't feel like it's shortchanged. It's got a lovely little feel to the steering. You don't get the leather steering wheel, but you still get this nice 2-spoke steering wheel that reminds me of the one I used to have in my old classic 500, and it's a really nice little wheel to hold. It's just the right size and just the right girth. You always tell where the wheels are pointing. The suspension itself in the chassis is really well judged, and of course a lot of that comfort is down to, there's still a little bit of jiggliness to it, but it's quite a short car, remember, so it's got quite a short kind of wheelbase. But where it kind of claws back in this model is it's on the 15-inch wheels, so there's a bigger side profile on the tyres, and actually that helps with the ride comfort. I'm going to stop short of calling it a really refined little car, but it's pretty decent. The level of ambient noise in here is really low. You get a tiny little bit of wind rustle up there when you're up at kind of higher speeds, round about the door mirrors, and that's about it. The suspension's relatively quiet, a bit of bump thump you can hear there across the kind of transverse ridges that's on this piece of road, but there's not much else that I can comment on from that point of view. Brakes are nice. Now, brake regeneration, let me talk about that for a little minute, because as with the other cars in the 500 range, you do get 3 driving modes, and that's where you find brake regeneration. So what Fiat have done is you don't have paddles, you can't adjust it, you don't have a B button where it gives you've got it in one of the driving modes. So this E mode switch down here, I've been driving it around in kind of normal mode, which is fine, and that will coast. So in other words, you brake, you use the brake pedal to stop the car. If you want a level of brake regeneration, and it is just the one level you get, then what you do is you flick it to range mode, and then when you lift off the throttle, you get brake regen, and it will bring the car up to an absolute stop and hold it there. So it is pretty decent. It's not quite one pedal driving, but it's, I'd say round about town actually it probably is, in fairness. So that's very good. The last of the 3 modes is what they call Sherpa mode, and that's economy and all other cars speak. In other words, it's getting the very last little bit of miles out of the battery, and it starts to kind of shut things down, and there's a little bit more of a kind of deadness to the throttle pedal. I haven't bothered with it, to be honest with you. I just keep it kind of normal, a range mode, and it's been perfect, it's ideal. But in all other aspects, I don't feel shortchanged in this Action model over the higher models in the range. You still got a nice comfortable seat, the seat's the same, it still holds you well. They've got kind of memory foam in the head restraints, which is quite nice, rather than those horrible hard plastic ones that were in that second generation car. In my old 20 I used to have those, I really didn't like them. There's a feeling of quality across the car as well. I mean, as I've said, it's not a cheap car, I get that, and it doesn't feel like a cheap car though. You always thought, little sort of like basic Fiats, they were always quite cheap and kind of plasticky and nasty. This isn't. This is really well finished inside. There's no hard edges to the plastic. You know, everything feels really well screwed together. Everything feels like it's going to really last. And I think that's, anyone who has these kind of preconceived ideas of what a small Fiat's like, you need to drive this, because it really isn't what Fiats of old are like at all. This is a cracking little car. I like it. The only thing, if it was me, I'd definitely option up the radio pack, because I just think the faff of having to put your phone in it and plug it in and all that, can't be doing with that. And also as well, you get the wireless charging as well, and wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So to me, that radio pack makes absolute sense. Put that on it, and this is an absolute winner for me. And it's when it comes to price that the little 500 Action starts to make an awful lot of sense. You see, because this car here is £23,500 starting price. And that's before the UK plug-in car grant is taken into account, meaning as it stands at the moment at £1,500, it drops this to just £22,000 on the road. Now don't get me wrong, £22,000 is still a lot of money, and it is a lot of money for a Fiat 500. But it is a significant £5,000 saving over the next model in the 500 range. And you can buy a lot of electricity with £5,000, a lot of electricity. And when it comes to competition, well, the 500 Action again sort of pretty much stands out there on its own, because the closest competition, such as the Mini Electric and the Honda E, are more in line with the higher spec levels of the 500. Other small cars to consider: Renault Zoe, Peugeot E208, Vauxhall Corsa E, again closing in on that £30,000 bracket, a lot more money than the 500. In fact, the only cars that really did stand comparison to this were the Volkswagen Group triplets of the Seat Mii Electric, the Skoda Citigo EiV and the Volkswagen E-Up. But you can't buy them anymore. They're off the price list. You can't order them anymore. And Volkswagen Group have yet to show their hand of what they're going to do with this small car from the ID range. So if you want a brand new small electric car and you don't want to spend more than £25,000, this is pretty much it. And again, it's a significant saving over its compatriots. In fact, the biggest competition that the 500 Action has is a used car. See, here's what we like and what we don't like about the Fiat 500 Action. We like its style, its design, the quality of the interior and the materials used, and it drives like a Fiat 500 should. We don't like the infotainment through the phone is a bit of a hassle. Rear seat space is tight for adults, and white is the only standard colour. All others are optional. Now, normally when we have a car here at AutoEV, we have them for a few days, a week, and we use them as much as we can. We put them through different sort of driving scenarios, drive them on different type of roads, we have people in them, drive them empty, we drive them until they almost run out of range, we charge them up, because we want to give you the best, most comprehensive review of a car that we possibly can. And we've pretty much done that with the 500 before. But this time it was slightly different, and I wanted to live with the smaller battery Fiat 500 for a little bit longer, because I wanted to answer the question of whether you really should spend that extra money getting the bigger battery car, or whether this is all the Fiat 500 you could ever really need. And we have, as a family, lived with this car for quite some time now. In fact, I hid the keys to my wife's Land Rover, much to her displeasure, and gave her this car and said, I want you to use that as you would the Land Rover and see how you get on with it. And that's exactly what she did. She used it to drive to and from the station as her daily commute. So we've used it to go and pick my daughter up from her friends or take her swimming and such. I even used it, as I say, as a taxi to take my sister and brother-in-law to Heathrow the other day. So we put it through quite a hard life in its time with us in order to give you the answer. So our verdict is this: is it worth spending the extra money to get the bigger battery 500? Well, no and yes. Let me be clear about this. In 99% of what we've used this little car for, it has performed faultlessly, and there's not a single time where we've thought, I wish I had a little bit more range, except for one. Liz had to go to a meeting in another part of the country, and she was on quite a tight schedule in her diary. And if we'd had the bigger battery car, she could have got there and back without needing to recharge. With this, she would have had to have recharged, and her diary schedule wouldn't have allowed that as quick as it will charge. So I had to give her back the keys to the Land Rover. But that's one situation that we found ourselves in. So that's pretty good. So my conclusion is this: if you can live with a range that is now on round about 100 miles, because that's pretty much what you're looking at with this, then why spend the extra £5,000 on the bigger models and range? Don't get me wrong, I still think you should option up the radio pack, because that's the one glaring thing with this car I have found. It is a pain trying to put your phone in that thing and then use that. So to get in and just be able to switch the radio on, I think is well worth the extra outlay. But other than that, I think this is a phenomenal car for the money. In fact, I think this is probably the closest in character to the original classic 500 that Fiat now make. I think it's an absolute cracking little car, and it really is worth your consideration. Plus as well, you get to save £5 which, as I say, you buy some nice things. Thank you for watching AutoEV. As always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell button. It's down below so you receive notification of when our next video goes live. If you've been a supporter of us so far, thank you ever so much for being one. If you're not, please consider becoming one, because every little bit helps. Remember, we're on all other social media platforms, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Go and give us a like there too, because every little bit helps. And if you want to see more of our car reviews, well, we've got a huge amount coming up, not to mention light commercial vehicles. But if you want to see what we've done in the past, including the bigger battery 500, then stay on the AutoEV YouTube channel and have a look through our back catalogue. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for watching. I'll see you again soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe, and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.